your flesh and blood.
Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, new paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week, Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. And welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I am Reverend Dr. D. Richard Dugan, and he is my guest. He's returning. He is actually Ray. Oh my goodness, I cannot. Deptula. Ray Deptula. My apologies. I looked at it, I practiced it, and for some reason I looked at it again, and I'm going, "Who is that?" I know it's Ray. And Ray Deptula, thank you for being with us to return to talk about your. We'll call it your sequel novel to the first one that you had there, and this one is called I Can't Find My Way Home. Welcome back.
Thank you very much for having me.
You know, it's a very interesting title because it goes back to what we shared in the first conversation we had about that movie, Welcome, where the Vietnam vets who were going through this particular program were having, I would say, that kind of dilemma. They were finding it hard to find their way back home. Let me ask you first. We'll talk a little more about the book as far as the sequel, but let's talk a little bit about your journey. Have you found your way back home?
Wow, I never thought about that. I think that's something you work on your whole life. I think I'm pretty close, but probably not 100%. I'm in a good place at this stage in life. There are some things I miss about the place that I grew up, that I do consider my home up in southern Maine. But I'm here in Florida. Life is pretty good. I really don't have a reason to complain, but I'm in a good place mentally, spiritually, physically. So I would say I'm pretty well there, but maybe not all the way.
You know, I ask a question. I will ask this at the end of the program, but I'm going to ask you it a little differently here. Who was, before you went into the military, the Navy, for example, which is the branch that you were in, who was Ray Deptula?
Well, I would say I was quite immature. I was quite a bit in need of some place to be, some greater purpose. I was somebody that was looking for a reason to matter, and I had no illusion. I had to. A lot of friends where I grew up, they had families that had businesses, and they had a place to go after high school, say, and I had none of that. I came from a dysfunctional place, and I had no illusion that I had to take care of myself. So that was probably, job number one, was to find a place where I could support myself. But I was a scared kid, um, looking for looking for a place to be where I would hopefully grow. That's pretty much who I was. Somebody that I wish I could grab by the lapels right now and shake. Um,
Well, let's put it then another way. Rather than grabbing yourself of that age years ago by the lapels, what would be the message, if you will, the maybe from today where you are, what would be the message to Ray Deptula of pre-military service?
yeah, I grew up Catholic, and uh, my family, we went to church a lot, and that was part of just what I did, and I took that for granted. Um, towards the middle of my life, I kind of strayed away, but then now I'm back. Now I'm very much back in, not necessarily a Catholic mode, but just a spiritual mode where I see that God had me already, and was leading me at the time. And I wish I could have told myself that, look, it's not you by yourself. It's you got a support system. And if you'll just believe in that, I mean, I would have been a lot better off in some of my decision making if I just, allowed myself to believe that I was being guided. And but I thought that it was me and nobody, and I just didn't have the maturity at the time to, and it took me a long time to get that maturity, and I'm talking, probably in my 50s, before it hit me in the side of the head.
Mm,
And it was not me calling the shots. So, and that's what I would have told myself.
mm. It's a question. It's funny too. Some of these questions of a personal nature, I've never even asked myself, and maybe I should sit
Yep.
down and do that. Jot them down and say, okay, well, so what is your response to this question?
Yeah.
It is fascinating when we look back. And I'm having an experience these days, having just moved only a few months ago, since October of 2025, of unpacking. And now, I mean, we just packed stuff up and we packed it up. It took several months, which is weird, because we had plenty of time. I could have gone through the file cabinets and gotten rid of a lot of the papers that I did not need to bring with me. But we did not feel like we had a lot of time, even though the time kept going and going. So as I've been going through these file cabinets and these file folders and these pages, it is fascinating some of the things that I have found that I knew that I had, like in the back of my head, but I hadn't looked at them in literally decades. They've been in the file drawers for that long. And it's really, for example, I took photography in college in 79, and it was black and white. And I pulled out this stack of 8 by 10 pictures that I had printed, if you will. Um, and it was like, wow, I remember that. And that was the time when I was in college. Oh, there's my best friend. There's my brother-in-law, my eldest sister's husband, who is a widower. However, I just found out he is now in the process of getting married for I want to say the second time, because there was a woman between my sister and the present woman he's about to marry. He was going to marry number two, and then she passed away. And I think, wow. Anyway, I've been going through all of these different things. I've found a bunch of CDs of interviews that I've done. I'm going to resurrect, and people will be able to hear them on this program. When you go back in your mind, in your own personal history, whether it's through the material things or something clicks in your mind when you see something or you hear something, what have you, uh, do you has your therapy afforded you that opportunity to look at things differently now, because you're a different person today? And the past, of course, there's nothing you can do about it. But you're now able to look at it maybe with more of an open perspective. Hey, that's who I was, and maybe in one sense, I wouldn't be the person I am if I hadn't gone through all of that stuff that I would have warned myself about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, at the same time, I can't say that I'm really disappointed in who I was. I mean, I made some good decisions. I didn't do anything so wrong that I couldn't fix it. So all in all, I there could have been some tweaks, but I wish I had a little bit more faith in God than I did. And that's what that would have that would have probably helped me. But I didn't do a bad job, and I think I got to the right place, even in spite of myself. But when I look back, I'm not I'm not really I'm not really disappointed with my younger self, to be honest with you. But it could have been done better.
Ray Deptula is my guest. Can't Find My Way Back Home. Can't Find My Way Home is the title of the book. It's from a series that you're working on called Those Damn Yankees. And we're going to talk more with you about that as well as other things here on Tell Me Your Story. Military life, not an easy life, especially if there are conflicts brewing around the world. And of course, Ray Deptula is my guest. He's got his latest book that has not been released yet. It's on its way, and you can go to raydeptulaauthor.com so that when it is released, maybe I guess you could go there and pre-order. That would be a good thing. Get yourself in line, if you will. Tell us about this series that you came up with called Those Damned Yankees. I know that a lot of this has to do with the Revolutionary War, and this particular book, Can't Find My Way Home, takes place in 1780, 81?
Yeah, basically the back end of the American Revolution, and mainly down south in the middle states and the southern states is where it takes place on at the back end, 80 and 81. Yes.
And this focuses on a particular British soldier as well as one enslaved individual, correct?
That's correct. I need to make sure to tell people if they do read the book Can't Find My Way Home, they need to make sure they read the first book, A Dog Before a Soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And the first book, as we discussed before, that focuses on the main character. His name is Jack. He's a young British soldier. In the second book, he's a Continental soldier. He actually switches sides. And the second book is about him now participating in the revolution on the Continental side as a surrogate for somebody who had taken him in and sponsored him, along with a slave, Custis, who is also part and parcel. Jack and Custis together serve as surrogates for a wealthy landowner who was picked to come into the Continental Army, but instead substituted Jack and Custis for him. So in return for welcoming Jack into his family and marrying his daughter, if when he comes back. So Jack now switches sides and is now a Continental soldier with Custis in the second book.
That's an interesting dynamic in and of itself because that's happened in reality before. And I'm trying to remember the name. I don't know if I think it was the Mexican-American War. And the Irish were conscripted on the American side. And after seeing who they were fighting, there was a group of them that switched sides and were fighting for the Mexicans. So that's not unusual. Now, I realize that you're dealing here with stories. And in one book, as you say, he's on the American side. And now in the second book, he's on the British side. What made you want to drop him over to the other side? Is there still a connection with his his first book self, if you can put it in that context?
He's the same guy in both books. So he's a guy like there's a lot of folks in the military today. You could put them in any military. He just wants to do his job. He doesn't really bother himself so much to understand, what the fighting is about. But ironically, he's a peaceful guy. But ironically, what he does very well in life is be a soldier. So it's one thing he excels at, and he doesn't really care which side he's on. And in the second book, it's a means to an end because he thinks he's found a home, and all he has to do is survive and come back. And he's going to be let into this family, and he's in love with the landowner's daughter as well. So he'll do anything. He'll do anything to make that happen. So he agrees to go and take the wealthy landowner's place. During that time when when the Congress, who resisted forming a standing army for a long time in the beginning of the American Revolution because they thought standing armies were dangerous. When they finally realized they had to, they levied quotas on the provinces to cough up people. When that happened, and the volunteers ran out, or there weren't enough of them, it attracted people that were desperate, just like it did in the British Army. A dog before a soldier. The first book is named because to be in the British Army was you were considered the lowest form of life, and it would be the same thing in the Continental Army as someone who was taking the money to do that. Most people. The premise of the book is um, those that fight their nation's wars are typically those that can least avoid it, and that's certainly true. It was certainly true in the Revolutionary War. That just like the wealthy landowner, he got out of it by substituting people that probably didn't have much of a choice in for him.
Mm.
So, but Jack is the same guy. He's very quiet. He's illiterate, and now he's an officer.
Mm.
He is a natural leader, but doesn't realize it. And he's just a guy that does his job. He's just trying to get through the day, and get back to where he really wants to be, which is back in a family.
Mm.
So that's what. And the second book is really about his relationship with Custis, who's a slave. Custis doesn't want to be there either, and the dynamic with them. Custis is treated more like a commodity than a human being, and Jack is constantly torn between doing what's right for him and doing what's right for the both of them. So and they both want to get back to the place that they both consider home, is it back to Annapolis, Maryland, in this case. And so the second half of the book, the second book is very different than the first book, for a variety of reasons. It's more about the relationship with between Jack and Custis. The first book was more about the relationship between Jack and, say, the British Army and some of the other people there. But this one really focuses on between Jack and Custis, who he considers his friend, actually. Not anybody below him. And actually, Custis is literate and can read, and Custis has a lot of qualities that Jack admires, even though he's a slave. So they try to help each other, to survive the very volatile South and get back home.
It's interesting. I'm curious about the research into these books as far as what actually took place during the Revolutionary War. First of all, how long was that war?
It was about 8 years,
Wow, that's a
and it
long
depends.
time.
And it kind of depends when you really want to start counting. There's different places that you could count it from, but typically it starts, in 1775 at the Battle of Lexington Concord is the sort of the official. That's where the shooting. But you could start earlier than that if you wanted to. But it was about an 8 year affair altogether.
Can you say where and or when that first shot was fired? Do we know?
Yeah, well, April 19th, 1775 was the day that the British, marched out of Boston to Concord, 20 miles to the west to confiscate. Their intelligence said that there was a store of arms, cannon, muskets, gunpowder, munitions, and they were going to confiscate it. And so it got hidden, but unfortunately, they ran into the militia before they even got to Concord at Lexington, and around sunrise, and shots were fired. And now we've all heard about the shot heard around the world where somebody shot a musket, and nobody really knows who that was. If it went on the British side or if it was on the provincial side, still to this day we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But once that happened, then fighting started. All hell broke loose, and 8 militia were killed. The British continued on to Concord, and when word of that reached the outer townships, thousands of militiamen came out of the woodwork and decimated the British on their way back to Boston. So that's officially the start of what traditionally would be considered the start of the Revolutionary War. Was the battle of Lexington and Concord.
Mm.
Which
The
you
research that went into this, what is the process? Where do you go to get primary source information about these kinds of events that took place, so that you can weave the fictional stories of Jack and Custis into this narrative?
that's not that hard, to be honest with you. There's a ton of nonfiction books out there, that march through the revolution. I have a couple of them. There's actually one of my problems was there was so much information. It was hard for me to decide what not to put in, because it could have been too much. But my I there was two types of research that I did. The first rule I had for this book was I wanted to make sure that the timelines, the places, the events, the people that I used, if they were real, it was 100% accurate, and I got as close as I could. And I had a lot of, because I used the timeline of the revolution and events to kind of propel the story along.
Mm.
So and that wasn't hard. There's a lot of information out there.
Yeah.
The second kind of research I did, that I did absolutely zero research actually, was the interactions between the characters. I did nothing. I just simply transposed those that I personally experienced in my own military career over. And because I have a theory that those relationships are timeless.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it was then, now, 2,000 years ago, 2,000 years in the future, it's going to be the same. So I just took what I knew to be um, relationships that I've seen, the kinds of people, the kinds of interactions, and I just transposed them into that time period.
Sort of
So
along the lines of the names have been changed to protect the innocent of sorts.
kind of, sort of, I see, I see a lot of movies and books and TV shows that don't get it right. And it always bugs me when I see a military movie and a narrative is not what I consider to be accurate. So I wanted to write something, if for no other reason than I thought it was accurate. So
Mm.
I can say, okay, at least I like this. And it was interesting to me. That was the most fun about writing this book, was literally just taking my own personal experiences and repackaging them. Not an autobiography, but I wanted the texture, and the interaction between the people to be what I thought it should be.
Mm. Can't Find My Way Home is the title of the book, and it will be released as of this conversation, June 30th, 2026. You can go to Ray Deptula author.com will be linked to that website as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. Our conversation is with author Ray Deptula. He's a native of Wells, Maine, as well as a graduate of the Maine Maritime Academy. Spent 24 years in the U.S. Navy and the Naval Aviator as a naval aviator, and as well as a political military officer with service in Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and the Caribbean. Now, I can understand Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. What's going on in the Caribbean that you needed to be there? I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, people may not know, and I think current events have kind of borne this out. We've been down there in the Caribbean, for quite some time. The Navy has helping out the Coast Guard, and even though we don't have what we would call a major security threat in the Caribbean, we still have national interest there, and typically that turns into people smuggling and drug smuggling. So I spent a lot of time on small single deck ships that had a Coast Guard detachment on board, and we were looking for drug smugglers. Now we weren't blowing them up like we are now. We were just pulling them over, seeing if they had any suspect ship. Just like a law enforcement, like a traffic cop would pull them over, inspect them. If they had drugs, the Coast Guard detachment would confiscate the ship, and we'd bring them back to wherever. So a lot of that was a drug operation involved, and I did that quite a bit. And that goes on. That's been going on for a long time, and as long as I've been in the military. This was the 80s and 90s. It was very common to see numerous Navy ships down in that part of the world with Coast Guard detachments on board.
I know a lot of people are concerned with the method by which we are trying to stop all of that from going on. It seems almost counter to the U.S., shall we say, philosophy, specifically the civilian philosophy. Let's just say, of mercy and those kinds of things, due process, et cetera, et cetera. When you blow something up, there's no due process. That's it. It's over.
Yeah.
And it's, and then there's no way to verify whether or not they are guilty of what they're being accused and sentenced to death for, because it now is at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah.
That's what's troubling to a lot of folks. It's not a question of we need to stop these drugs from coming into this country.
Yeah.
What would really be great is if we could stop the need for them.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the way that a lot of people are viewing what's going on, this is sort of a sidebar conversation here, is that with the way things have been going in this country, specifically politically and ideologically, philosophically, there were a lot of people who were turning to those very drugs to escape.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why people do that. They are saying, I've had enough. I'm going to disconnect. I'm not going to kill myself, but I'm certainly not going to stay in this reality. I'm going to create my own reality. Did you find that was sometimes what went through the minds of some of your fellow soldiers in the Navy, as well as in other branches, that it's like, I realize I took an oath and I realize that I'm supposed to follow orders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm.
But at the same time, personally, it's like, I got a problem with this.
Yeah.
And again, we're talking about different times during your stint in the military.
Yeah. Well, thank God for me that I was never asked to do something that I had a problem with. And I always, that's a fear that everybody has. Am I going to get asked to do something not necessarily dangerous, but that I don't agree with? I have this debate with a lot of my friends, and we don't always agree, and I'm glad I'm not one of the guys out there that's being asked to put a missile into one of these boats. I think though what's changed, when I was out there we were looking for, the drugs were typically marijuana or maybe cocaine, so, not something that was going to kill somebody, but now we're talking about, I think what's changed is it's the fentanyl. It's in, it's that those drugs are going to be responsible for killing a lot of Americans. And there's a thought out there that these drugs are being purposely sent to the U.S. because of that. So, I mean, and that's a real debate. Is that really the case? But I think that the types of drugs have changed the game. And also we have a pretty good intelligence system. Most people don't realize how good of intel, and I have to believe, from my experience, that we know what's going on in those vessels. Now, the ironic part about that is the people that run those vessels, they know what's going to happen, what could happen, and the people that are pressed into being the crew on the ship, there are people that are also forced into doing that. So, unfortunately, the people that are dying under those circumstances are not necessarily the real criminals. The real criminals are the ones that sent them. But these guys are people that don't have a choice. It's like, you go, we're going to kill your family. That sort of thing. Because the real criminals aren't going to take a chance themselves to personally, haul the drugs like that. They're going to use a proxy that is forced to be there because they don't have another choice. That to me is one of the ironies of that whole business. But it's a real dilemma to be asked to do something that you personally don't believe is right, and you've got to do, at the end of the day, you have the right to refuse an illegal order. Now, what constitutes a legal order is debatable, and you've got to know that you're going to have to probably go to some kind of legal hearing, to defend yourself if you're gonna say no. So it's a decision I'm glad I never had to make, but it's one I think that's being made today, and it's unfortunate.
I may have asked you this question before, but if it is deemed that the actions that have been taken specifically, not so much with off the coast of Venezuela, but in the Middle East, uh, are basically unlawful, the decision to begin that conflict becomes an illegal act. Um, what about the soldiers who followed those orders? And you don't have to answer that question, but what are your thoughts, if there are any, in regards to their responsibility under those? Because we've heard this phrase many, many times over the decades and centuries. I was just following orders.
Well, just following orders does not um, justify doing something illegal. That's not a defense.
Mm,
But most of the people that are in the military, they have a certain, they wouldn't be there for the most part. They're volunteers, so they have a certain amount of trust in their government that their government is going to make the right decision. I know also, before an action is taken, a military action, that the lawyers have gone over this, with a fine tooth comb to make sure they're on legal ground where they cannot really be challenged to say this was an illegal action doing this. Now we can debate that, like with the drug smugglers, although they've been deemed, a terrorist organization. So that automatically gives us the right to hit them.
mm,
Now, are they really a terrorist organization? That to me is the real question, and that's where intel comes in. But when you're a soldier or a sailor, I mean, you're it's almost, you take it for granted that your government's going to do the right thing. Now, maybe these days, that's a question that maybe there's more questions than I could not even fathom being asked to do something that I disagreed with when I was in the operational Navy. It wouldn't even it wouldn't occur to me. Now, they may ask me to do something I don't want to do, because it's very dangerous. But if I don't go, then who's gonna go? Someone else has to go. So, that and that's why you go do that.
Yeah.
But to be asked to go do something immoral, I couldn't even fathom being asked to do that when I was in.
Well, I'll tell you, it's a conversation that a lot of people are having these days, and it's one that we bring up from time to time just to get some observations, get some perspectives, and we thank you for your response as we continue. We're talking with Ray Deptula, and of course, his latest work. We hope that you will get a copy of it when it comes out, June 30th, 2026. And you can go to raydeptulaauthor.com to get a copy or pre-order Can't Find My Way Home as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. Ray Deptula is my guest, and with precision and perspective, he taps into timeless concepts such as human nature and moral survival, and offering a powerful reminder that yesterday's conflicts continue to shape today's world and that history seems destined to repeat itself. And boy, Ray, you have said a mouthful right there, because that is one of the interesting things that came up in a conversation that I had with a guest once. And I brought that up. I said, well, yeah, but the saying, if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. And he then responded with, learn what? And I was just flabbergasted. What do you mean learn what? Learn from history doesn't mean specifically what, but learn that if we didn't like the history that we have in the pages of the history books that we have, we can make different choices. In terms of your past, present, and future, do you recall what your perspective of the future was prior to, or the younger Ray, and what your perspective of the future is today in the 21st century, 2026?
Yeah, that's a good question. The Navy sent me to a place called the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island, and I was this was back, it's a good 20 years ago. That's where I got the idea for the book, actually. But the Navy War College ruined me. Up into that point, I was kind of what we call fat, dumb, and happy. I didn't think much of politics, and here I am. I was pushing 40. Very happy to, at that point to be in the Navy, to be a pilot, to go fly and do whatever they told me, I was going to be doing. So sent me to Naval War College, where we studied the relationship between the government, the military, and the people. And I learned to look at political events and news events. I was never the same after that. I could never unsee now, and I have to. And it awakened in me a passion for this. But I wish I could have gone back to just being, kind of naive. Because now I can't, I can't watch, what's going on in the Mid East or Venezuela or whatever without an opinion, without analyzing it according to what I learned at the Naval War College. We went all the way back to the Peloponnesian War, and we studied all the conflicts up until the Vietnam War, why they happened, how they happened, what led it, what factors led to it, and you start to see a pattern, and history has repeated itself, and people don't learn, and we don't learn, and we're probably not going to learn. We're going to make the same mistakes probably today that we made over and over and over again. So that seems to be a constant with human nature, that we don't learn from history, no matter when.
And I guess this is more a question for a psychologist, a psychiatrist, or a therapist, if you will. But what seems to be our problem? Why can we not seem to learn from history and not repeat the same acts that have been repeated for millennia?
I think people generally live in their own little world. They worry about the price of gas. You know, can I make the mortgage this month? And they don't really have time, or they can't be bothered to think out past that. And it really is tough, because I never did either. And like I said, my year at the Naval War College, studying, was a master's program for national strategy. I like to joke it ruined me. So, and now I like to look at things so that I can learn. But most people, they're just too busy. They're just too busy with day to day life and making sure they can put food on the table to bother themselves with that sort of thing. Is what I think. And that's human nature as well. We just default to what's easier if we can get away with it. And learning from history is just too hard.
Yeah, apparently, apparently, well, in Can't Find My Way Home, we follow Jack Halliday, and that's spelled Halliday, who has basically deserted the British Army during the Battle of what is this? Of Monmouth.
Mon.
Monmouth.
Yeah.
And that's after basically killing his drunken comrade, commanding officer in self defense, and he finds refuge with a wealthy landlord or landowner, I guess I should say, in Annapolis, who offers Jack he offers him a hand of his daughter. Now that's another interesting twist in the story. In addition to the other character that you have in there, Curtis, who Custis, I should say, who is basically who is a slave. We're going to find out more about Jack and Custis, as well as Ray Deptula, as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. The fascinating history of our revolution. I've often said this, Ray Deptula, author of Can't Find My Way Home, in the Those Damn Yankees series. The interesting thing or observation for me, from I guess you could say a psychological or philosophical perspective, is the reason why the United States specifically can't seem to learn from history, can't seem to stop fighting with everybody else in the sandbox, okay, is because there's we'll call it a karmic pattern. This country was birthed in and through violence. Forget the ideologies of wanting freedom and liberty and pursuit of happiness. We attained those elements, if you will, and others through violence. Ergo, our path seems as though that's what's been happening. We can't seem to break that cycle. Now, can we break that cycle? Well, that's kind of up to each one of us as to whether we do that. What do you think? Do you think that there's that sort of it's in the United States as a nation? It's in that DNA, and maybe that's one of the reasons why it's not a question of learning from history as much as it is finding a way to rewrite the DNA.
I don't think we can. People have been fighting with each other for various reasons forever. I don't really think that we're any more violent than any other human
Sure.
set of humans or country. Now, we had decided during the American Revolution, prior to it, that we were being abused as a people, that we wanted to be British, but our government in London was, in our mind, way of thinking, was abusing us. Now, we asked them nicely if we could leave, and they said no. So if we wanted to leave, we had a choice. We had stay and be abused, or leave and fight. So those were the two choices.
Yeah.
It was just like, World War II. If we wanted to stop Hitler, were we just going to ask him nicely? No, we were going to have to fight him, and that was the choice.
Yeah.
So sometimes in those cases, that's a clear cut. Now you can make a argument. Did we have to go to Vietnam? Was that necessary? Was that necessary to kill 58,000 Americans? For what? That was our choice to do that. And that's the middle. And by the way, there's a lot of parallels between what we experienced in Vietnam and what the British experienced in the American Revolution. It was their Vietnam for all practical purposes.
Hmm.
But that was another choice that we decided we've got to go. We've got to go. Fight. To achieve
Hmm.
this goal. We don't always get it right. And we've made some. Did we have to go to Afghanistan for 20 years? What did that get us? So these you know these are the areas where we could probably do a better job at our decision making and learning of our revisiting history to inform us what's going to work and what's not going to work. But I don't think
It,
that I
Go ahead.
don't I don't think that we're going to ever stop. Um, we as humans, fighting each other. I don't think it's in us. But I also don't think that we as Americans are any more violent or whatever you want to say that than anybody else. I think typically, or to be honest with you, I think the Europeans are kidding themselves right now. They have a horrendous problem with immigration, and they're going to have to fight. They're setting themselves up for a horrible fight of which they're not prepared for. And so there's also the other side of the coin where if you do the wrong things, you get drug into a fight that you're not prepared for. You know, versus us who took like in World War II, we took the action to you know to get out in front of that um, and and do so on our terms.
I found it interesting too. Speaking of World War II, we actually fought in two different theaters, one in the Pacific and, of course, one in Europe.
Yeah.
And boy, I tell you, that must have really, again, I don't know the statistics, you probably do, but that must have really stretched our resources to the max. Fortunately, of course, at that time, the United States in particular converted many of its factories so that they could build what was necessary to be able, I guess, to conduct battles on those in those two theaters.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we were an industrial giant to begin with, just because of the size and nature of the country. And it challenged us for sure. Germany had a similar problem. They were fighting two fronts. They were fighting, the Allies on one side and the Russians on the other, and that decimated them. That
Mm.
didn't work out for them, and that was probably why they lost more than anything else. With us, it actually propelled us, post World War II to be a superpower.
Mm.
Without World War II, economically, awakening our manufacturing capability, and we weren't the best soldiers either. We could just pump out the most stuff, and we just overwhelmed people with our ability to just keep throwing things at them. And it's still kind of the way we are today. But um, you know that getting back to your original question, I just don't think I don't think we're ever going to stop being having to or choosing to fight with each other for various reasons.
Well, I'll tell you, it's really it's very complicated. There's no question about it. But I still hold out hope that somehow, some way, we'll figure out this whole dynamic, and maybe not in its entirety, but at least for us in particular. I don't know that putting up barricades on the east and west coasts and on the north and south, and secluding ourselves from the rest of the world is the answer, any more than the other extreme as well. There's got to be a balance there, and I do think that there will come a day
Yeah.
when maybe we will return to some of the basic principles that this country, as our document state, was founded on. And I'm hoping that that happens as well. And I'm sure that people will be able to read a little bit about that. in the context of your latest work, which is Can't Find My Way Home. It is Ray Deptula's second novel in the series, Those Damned Yankees. We say that an awful lot about the Yankees ball club quite often when they
Yeah.
beat us, whether it's the Dodgers or the D-backs, whoever it is. Although I do have to say, I do take a little pride in knowing that we beat them in 2001 in 7 games.
Yeah.
Although I did find it strange that there we were in New York and we lose what was it? Game 3, I think it was. And we put the same pitcher on the mound in game 4. And I
Yeah.
could not understand why. Wait a minute. Usually you give a guy a couple of days off. Why is this guy back there again? And it had nothing to do with the fact that we lost game 3. Okay. It's just usually you have that space. But nonetheless, that's the series that we encourage you to get involved in. Go to Ray Deptula. That's raydeptulaauthor.com. We'll be linked to that website as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. As always, Ray, this is fascinating. I have always enjoyed my conversations with you. It's always great to have you back here. I know there'll be another book in the series, and we hope that you'll join us again. And I hope that people will indeed get a copy of your book, whether it's the first or second, or just start collecting in the series, because this isn't just fiction. I'm sure that people will be able to determine the historic elements from the fictional activities or encounters or dramas, if you will, dynamics, I should say, within the characters.
Yeah.
And we need to better understand who
Yeah.
we are and where we came from, so as we know kind of how we got here.
Yeah. So there's one other comment I want to make. One thing that fascinated me in particular, that I write quite a bit about in the second book here, is the war in the South was very different than the war in the North, where it started. Most people think of the American Revolution, they think of Boston, they might think of New York, but they typically don't think of the South. And the South was a very, very nasty affair. The British went down there because they thought there'd be more loyalist support. They completely polarized South Carolina, and there was no middle ground. In most provinces, there was maybe a third there were loyalists, a third in the middle, a third a patriot. Down in the South, there was no middle ground, and there were militias that were masqueraded. There were bands of thugs masquerading as militias, and these people were just outright, killing each other, neighbor killing neighbor. Um, it had nothing to do with the cause one way or the other, and it was a very, very nasty affair, and that we don't really read about that much. And but I wrote extensively on it as part of my story. The amount of violence and turbulence that happened, that was the worst part of human nature in South Carolina in 1780.
And I don't know, again, statistically speaking, you can probably enlighten us as well, that the Civil War here in the United States was still stands, if I'm correct, as the largest loss of life conflict that the United States has been involved in.
Yeah.
And that's pretty sad. I also heard too, and maybe this was part of the settlement, if you will, between the North and the South, that every single person who fought against the North was basically a traitor, was definitely could be convicted of treason because they were fighting against the United States government.
Yeah. Well, in their mind, they were doing the same thing that we did when we broke away from
Sure.
Great Britain.
Mhm.
That was the exact same thing, except they didn't get away with it. They lost. But one thing Lincoln did do in the end, he said, "Okay, it's over. We're not going to punish the South. Yes, we could consider them traitors. Yes, we could, try them, but we're not. We're going to reconstruct these states, and
Yeah.
we're going to just call it even and concentrate on rebuilding, not taking vengeance."
I suppose one
And
perspective might be that they've already lost enough,
yeah,
as did the
he
North.
well he he saw it as, that, hatred corrodes the vessel that contains it, and that just wasn't going to work out for anybody,
Yeah.
particularly the winning side. It wasn't going to work out. If we were going to be reunited, we were going to have some reconstruction
Yeah.
and forgiveness.
Yeah. What would be
Uh,
accomplished? I mean, really, what would have been accomplished if they had rounded up all of the Southerners who had fought? You know, who knows? The conflict maybe not wouldn't still be going on today, but the bitterness, like you said before, the hatred. I have no clue as to what timeline we would be down if that had been done. And
yeah,
so I'm glad that there was a certain level of level-headedness on the part of Lincoln, of mercy and
yeah,
compassion and understanding, and saying, "Hey, look, we need to we need to clean the slate and start over here, and let's do that." Unfortunately, Ray, we can't start over, at least not here, but we can have you back when you do have your next installment of Those
yeah.
Damn Yankees, the series. We encourage people to get a copy of your book and go to raydeptulaauthor.com. And I can't thank you enough for being a part of what we're doing here to try to, I hope, educate and inspire and enlighten people a little bit about who and what we are as United States citizens. I want to say Americans, but there are Americans in Canada and Mexico, Central and South America. They're all Americans too, but we're United States, if you will, U.S. Americans, if you want to put it in that context. But I thank you for sharing your insights and perspectives today.
Well, sir, I want to thank you for having me on. I will keep you up to date. Actually, this is the last book of the series, but I am going to write another book. It's not going to be on the same subject, but I'll be back. I'll let you know.
I look forward to that. I know we all will. I do want to ask you those three final questions, but I want to let you know. Thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story.
Yeah.
We are here with New Paradigms for a New World, giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. We are also podcasting at SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. We're on YouTube and Rumble, and we hope that you'll subscribe as well as click notification. And we hope that you will get a copy of my book, Choices, 5 Steps for Life. It's available through Amazon. And we also hope that you can help us out financially. We can use all the help we can get. And we have not only a PayPal account, but you can also support us financially through Zella. Just use my email address, richard@richarddugan.com, with the app that we know most people do use and have. And we would be gratefully appreciative. And we also hope that you will take some time during this, the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to and follow the promptings of that still small voice. And to wrap things up, we always ask those three questions of our guests, and we're going to do that right now by asking, who is Ray Deptula?
Ray Deptula is a damned Yankee himself from Southern Maine. He's a retired naval officer, naval aviator. He's a rediscovered spiritual being that understands very well that he's not in charge on this planet, and he's a guy that utilized that outlook to actually write this book. I didn't write it. I think God wrote it through me, and that's who I am.
What gets you up in the morning?
The thought to do better today than I did the day before, and continual improvement, and to try to make this world a better place.
And finally, what was your best day?
My best day. Um, I think my best day was a day that I actually was able to actually publish my book and get it into motion. I've always known I was a writer. It took me a while to, to stop procrastinating. But when I finally was able to pick the fruit off the tree by publishing my book, that was my best day.
I will just give you a little advice that when you feel as though you're procrastinating, because it took me 20 years, almost 22 years, to finally get my book published. I reminded myself that number one, it will come out when it's ready, kind of like a baby at the end of 9 months, and that when the time is right, I like to refer to it as divine right timing.
Mm. I agree. I totally agree.
Oh,